Hello, everybody. Welcome. This is Gretchen Jordan from Alive, and I just want to welcome everybody to today's webinar. I'm going to go quickly to the correct screen, and we've got quite a few folks on the call today. We're going to give them just a moment to log in. It's Gretchen here. We're going to do some quick introductions here in just a moment. Just want to confirm that you can see my Alive Academy screen.
Looks good.
All righty, wonderful. And we've got us here on video here just for a moment, and we will turn off that video as soon as we get started with the presentation. And we're going to jump in here in just a moment, just waiting for more people to arrive. Now, we are recording this call, and after the presentation, oh, it's on the hour according to my time. Bear with me. That'll be very short because it's only 2 o'clock in Eastern time. We will record, and we will be getting out a PDF copy of these slides from Tomomi's presentation. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So Donna, please go ahead and kick us off.
Everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I hope we find you in good health. I hope you are equally as lucky with this gorgeous weather that I have. But we have a great subject in line for you today, and it's one that's often overlooked. Today we'll be learning more about how to take your volunteer training online. And we're incredibly honored to welcome Tomomi Summers with us today. She is the Director of E-Learning with Nonprofit Connect. She's actually one of us. She has been leading volunteer engagement for several years with a focus in animal welfare. She's also a well-versed trainer. She's been teaching trainings, and many of those have been in volunteer engagement for many years. We're incredibly honored to have her lead this discussion today. So thank you.
Thank you. All right. So I wanted, oh, I'm sorry. Donna, if you want to go over the housekeeping, the chat and all of that, and then I'll take over.
I've got that, Donna. So just a little bit about the housekeeping. We're using Zoom. Your audio and video may cut out a little bit, but as soon as we turn off the videos, it should get much better. And if you do have any questions, you can type them into the chat box. I'll be watching that from here, and we'll pass off the questions to Tomomi as we go. Please feel free to ask any time, but there'll be plenty of time for questions and discussion at the end. And I'm going to just let you know, again, we're doing a quick recording of this, and we'll be getting that off to everybody at the end. So now I'm going to stop sharing, and we are going to pass it over to Tomomi for her presentation. Please go ahead.
All right. Sorry about that. I had my video up and I didn't realize how much it was slowing down everyone's audio. So thank you for your patience with me. Those of you who are joining us from Nonprofit Connect, thank you. I want to thank Alive for collaborating with me and with Nonprofit Connect so that we can kind of nerd out on volunteer training, specifically online. And I think a handful of you know me from hosting the webinars, and this is one that I'm actually presenting. So bear with me while I step on the other side of my comfort zone. So taking volunteer training online, are you guys seeing my slides advance? Let's pull up the chat so I can see what you're saying. Okay, good job. Okay, so first thing, I want to know a little bit more about all of you guys who are on the call today. If you wouldn't mind entering into the chat, what is it that you want to get out of this training? What made you look at this description and sign up and take an hour out of your day to nerd out on volunteer training? And while you guys are typing that into the chat, I'm going to talk a little bit about why we do this. So this graphic on the right here is, I think that most of us in the sector are pretty familiar with it. This idea that whatever the injustice is or the mission area that we're trying to accomplish is that seems really big and scary. If we just organize ourselves, we can, flip the script. And what always strikes me with leading volunteers is that we as those leaders are kind of trying to glue together all of the little fish and coordinate all of the little fish to then flip and turn around on the big fish. So when we're taking volunteer training online, one thing that I think is important to consider is that we're using this as a tool to accomplish our mission. I know that sounds really obvious, but sometimes we get so excited about the bells and the whistles and the shiny objects that we lose a little bit of perspective. So the whole point is to get your volunteers more engaged, maybe more of them, and more effective in accomplishing your mission. So business case being efficiency. If you're doing this online, you can reach people who are not in your area geographically. You can reach more people at a time, typically. Your capacity. So sometimes taking a training that you're doing in person online can have a similar effect to using email templates instead of typing them out every time, or the forms or all the pieces of the training online and off that is consistent that you can use over and over again. Thank you guys for entering into the chat. Caroline, Chris is all right. And so who else is doing national sort of grassroots organizing organizations do a lot of this online because the nature of their volunteer work is online. If they are national, like Alive, for example, where they have volunteers, board members, advisory committees all over the place geographically. So it's just kind of in the nature that they'll do it. But a lot of organizations that have a high volume of volunteers. So for example, animal shelters, which is the world that I came from. And then organizations that require compliance training, especially like any organization where you have to background check, child abuse screen your volunteers. A lot of those compliance or like CPR or mandatory report or those types of things are happening online. And I've got a little bit of a slowdown on my slides here. If you could just let me know if that is coming through for you guys. Oh, Kristen says it's a logistics issue, but you also have a lot of volunteers who are not quite as comfortable with the technology or tech phobic. Yes, I have heard that before. Okay, so some considerations. The first thing that I think we need to really consider is whether you can really break up your training into small bite-sized pieces. And by this, I'm talking about really simple things like a job aid, a flow chart, a how-to with a couple screenshots, cheat sheets, short videos. Even you can create GIFs of, for example, if you're trying to show your volunteers on our website, you navigate here and then here. You can create a capture of your screen that's just a GIF, so it's not taking up as much bandwidth as a video. But just remember that when people are online, they're on the internet. So they, or if they're on their phone accessing your training, you're up against a lot of distractions. So you want to keep it short, to the point, and something that's immediately can be implemented or can be applied. Another thing to consider is the frequency with which you are going to use this. So if you're trying to translate an in-person training to an online training, you want it to be something that you're going to get some return on your investment of time and effort. If you're teaching it very frequently and you're always selling out or filling up your spots, I should say, you have, it's several times a month. These are really good candidates to either take online or take pieces, and I'll talk about that a little bit more, but take pieces of those trainings and move them online to move more people through that training a little bit more efficiently. Another thing is volume. I know some of you are organizations that have a lot of volunteers, and some of you are at organizations with fewer volunteers. But one thing that I think we can all relate to is when we have a large class or we have a large group of potential volunteers, we can end up with a bottleneck because we are trying to schedule everyone, find a time and date that works for everyone, that we're trying to move people through, maybe there's more volunteers than there are trainers, or maybe, you know, so we'll often experience a bottleneck for in-person training that can be alleviated when we take some or all of that training online. And then some other variables. So I would love to know from you guys, just type into the chat, what else are you considering as you're moving things online? Some things that I have seen come up are, for example, that the training itself is inconsistent. It may change over time. If we're training volunteers on one way to do something, it's, you know, 6 months from now, it's going to be totally different, or even 2 weeks from now, it's going to be totally different. What is the existing comfort level with working online? Are your volunteers, like I mentioned, some of these organizations that are kind of grassroots online organizations that engage people from all over the country, or maybe all over their state, they're already online, and so taking training online makes a little bit more sense. Or maybe there's zero comfort level within your volunteer pool. What's the access that people have? And by access, I mean both, do people have access to computers and mobile devices? And then is your system, or are your trainings going to live in a place on the internet that's easily accessible on a mobile device or a computer that's maybe not hooked up to super high-speed internet? And then support. Do you currently have volunteers who are helping you train other volunteers? Do you have volunteers who are helping you manage the admin side of your job? Do you have volunteers who are kind of close to you in your day-to-day work, and can they help you get started? So I know this slide is a little bit hard to look at, but there's a lot of different ways that you can structure moving training online. And I think it's really helpful to, again, weave it into the experience of your volunteers outside of training. So a lot of times we're recruiting on the internet, right? We're recruiting online, on social media, on our website. We're taking applications online. Often we have a volunteer database that is connected to that online application, so they go straight into our database. So we are essentially training our volunteers to expect an experience online that can streamline their process, that can give them a good experience, that can bring them closer to your mission, even if they face a barrier of time or geography. And then perhaps we are scheduling an in-person orientation, or we're doing an orientation online, or we're doing like a basic big umbrella 30,000 foot view orientation video before a more tactical hands-on on location orientation with maybe a tour of your facility. And then as we're actually training into those specialized roles for volunteers, we, a lot of times without realizing it, I think we are using these online tools in conjunction with in-person learning. And so in the e-learning world, we call that blended learning. So that is stuff that you do ahead of, during, and after your in-person training that can be done online. So for example, you're gathering questions ahead of your in-person training. You are flipping the classroom. So you're handing or distributing materials, reading materials, video content that you expect your volunteers to familiarize themselves with before they actually come to the training. We are providing a resource library where they might find their volunteer handbook, policies and procedures, those types of things, but we might also be putting those job aids and cheat sheets there. And then afterward, we're following up via survey. We may need to have them pass a compliance test. We may have to have them prove that they have absorbed this much knowledge and can then apply it to this situation so that you can then certify them for a specific role. And then when we move fully online to like a fully online course or module, that's something that we can do in a really slick and sexy way online using like a learning management system or something like that. Or we can also be pretty scrappy. We can use all in the resources, I'll go over this, but we can use simple tools like PowerPoint to actually create an online video course type thing. And then social media really feeds into those on both sides. On the right side, I put feedback in its own golden box. I think that ideally we are asking for and accepting feedback from volunteers at every step. So we want to know at the recruitment point, if we're advertising on social media, that's where you're getting comments from people saying, hey, I'd love to volunteer. Can I bring my 14-year-old child with me? At the point of application, hopefully on your application, if it's relevant for your organization, you're asking, how did you hear about us? Or, what is your area of interest or your area of expertise? And again, with orientation training, every single step, I want to ask for that volunteer feedback. And some really good ways to do that are just online surveys so that people can do it quickly afterward. They can do it anonymously if that's appropriate. They can provide their information to have a conversation about their feedback afterward. Of course, you can do this analog on paper as well, but it's super slick to have it online. And then you also have an archive, so you can start to pick out the patterns as well. Addressing fears. Okay, so I know that some of you said that some of your volunteers are not tech savvy and maybe are tech phobic. One of the fears is, we all have different comfort levels working online. I really recommend taking baby steps. Don't expect people to jump off the high dive with you. Let them wade into the waters as they are comfortable, and provide support. And I think it's appropriate, this will depend on your organization, but I think it's appropriate to allow and support outliers when it makes sense to your organization. So for example, when I was managing volunteers at an animal shelter, we were moving into a new volunteer database. People were used to signing in on paper. We needed everyone to have an email address because we would send out like information, liability waiver type stuff, like risk management type stuff. And we had sort of a burden of proof to say we had communicated all of these things to our volunteers. So we had to require an email address. But I absolutely allowed and supported outliers. I had a couple of volunteers who absolutely were tech phobic and they were not interested, but I knew that they were going to be amazing assets to the organization. I knew that I could maintain, and so yeah, I supported those outliers. I didn't create the rules so that everyone would have to follow them and I had to be all rigid. Really, I like to create rules or guidelines so that we have a structure that then we know if we're going to stray away from this, we know why and how. And then the last thing, don't assume based on age. So I have worked with organizations where most of the volunteers are retirement age, older, and they're super tech savvy. And then I've also had volunteers come in and they're Gen Z, they're 18 years old and they're all over Snapchat, and some of this technology is like second nature, but the type of technology that we're using in our work is a little bit different and there's a greater learning curve. So just like you wouldn't assume anyone's t-shirt size when you're giving them their volunteer shirt, let them tell you, and yeah, ask what is your comfort level. If you can be specific, give them an idea, maybe like a screenshot of this is what our system looks like. Here are the points that you're going to need to know, that kind of thing. So because I think it's also a subjective question. I don't consider myself incredibly tech savvy, but everything's relative. So let your volunteers tell you what they're comfortable with. Another fear is that we're going to lose that hands-on learning that's so important to a lot of our work. And what I will tell you is that if your online training is really doing its job, it should be freeing you up for more hands-on learning. It should be taking out the pieces that are in person that don't need to be in person. It should not be trying to replace anything that does need to be in person or hands-on. It should be increasing your efficiency, not bogging you down. And then another big fear always is change. we can apply everything we know about change management and everything that I know that as leaders of volunteers, you guys are already doing, where you are assigning ownership, you are sharing power, establishing buy-in, building in different checkpoints and other means for support so that your volunteers are doing this with you. You're not doing it to your volunteers. Another fear is time to produce. So I mentioned you can create very slick and sexy online volunteer orientations and trainings. You can also make very effective, scrappy duct tape without being able to see the duct tape volunteer orientations and trainings. Again, you want to take baby steps. Don't push people into something that they don't have the tools to navigate. You could also try piloting with a specific group, just like you would with a lot of your other new initiatives or changes, that you're going to try it and demonstrate success in one place where you have a high probability of success, right, before you start applying it as a blanket change to your entire volunteer population. Of course, involve the volunteers. Don't try to do it all yourself. And use simple tools. If it takes you longer to learn how to use the tool than to actually produce your content, move on, find something that's a better fit. I feel like this fear was big enough that it needed its own pullout. But the fear of losing that human connection. When we are engaging with our volunteers, depending on how your organization is set up, sometimes your volunteers, they develop a relationship with you even deeper than with your organization or your mission. They may have been attracted to the organization's mission. They may have been attracted to a specific volunteer opportunity. But for a lot of us, those volunteers stay because they build a relationship with you. So the last thing we want to do when we're moving training and orientations online is to remove that human interaction or to diminish it to the point where your volunteers are less engaged. Again, this is a tool to get your volunteers more engaged, not to play with technology because it looks really cool or it's really fun. So a couple of things that can help with that: keeping a close pulse on how often are we doing things in person versus online. How much of one are we doing before we're switching to another? How are we assigning training per role or task? Are we, accidentally ending up where a specific role or a specific group of volunteers is getting most of their interaction in person and another is getting most of their interaction online? Are we building in FaceTime, no pun intended, but in-person FaceTime? It could also be using an app like FaceTime where you're video calling or video conferencing. But very similar to how you would manage a virtual team of employees, if you have volunteers who are actually in their role, virtual volunteering and or getting their training and providing their feedback online, some of the tips and best practices of managing virtual teams will apply. So making sure that you intentionally schedule in those meetings and check-ins, whether it's separate from their volunteer role or task, or if it's built in as part of their day. If they are, we talked to a member here recently whose volunteers were driving and delivering meals, and they were picking up the meals from a location that was outside of the organization. And this was a recent change. And so we talked about ways that either a staff member, one of the leaders of volunteer engagement, could be at that site at the beginning or end of those shifts, or if there was another piece of meal delivery that's outside of the actual literal delivery that would bring them back to the office, every shift or every couple of shifts. So keeping it balanced. Other social opportunities can happen online. I do want to, I feel like it sounds obvious, but these social opportunities, they can replace your in-person social interaction if necessary. but it will never really truly replace that human to human conversation, that FaceTime. But it can be a huge asset and a huge compliment. So using groups on Facebook and LinkedIn can be a really good way to get that peer-to-peer learning and engagement going on. One word of, excuse me, of cautionary advice: if you are in charge of managing a lot of Facebook groups for your volunteers, I would definitely set expectations at the outset that there are hours that that group is operating, that it's not a 24/7 group, just because you don't want to give yourself a job that is 24/7 online. So like on Facebook, you can create a group and you can close it off to new posts or comments from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. or whatever. I would definitely recommend setting those expectations at the outset, especially if you have a lot of volunteers who are very, very chatty, or are the type to say, hey, I heard this is going on, can I get more information? And they're going to try to crowdsource that. Another thing is to put in your group rules or make a sticky post: for questions about this, contact this person. And just make it clear to your volunteers that this is so that you can ensure that they get the information that they need in a timely and accurate fashion. It's not to like try to police the group or anything. Again, I'm coming from the background of animal welfare, so I'm coming from a place where people are very, very passionate and get very emotionally invested in their work as volunteers. Staff and volunteers develop strong bonds sometimes. So if this does not apply to your group, you can tell me to calm down. Another thing you can do is enable comments and discussion forums on your actual trainings, whether that is on your website or if you have a YouTube channel that is volunteer training video clips, that you enable comments so that people can ask questions or say, yes, and this is also helpful, and contribute from their experience. And then like this, have video chats, have online meetings, do webinars, do conference calls, as long as what you're getting out of it is more than any type of like troubleshooting or technology glitches that you're having to manage. Another thing is just access to you as the leader. Your visibility and quick access to you is so helpful when your volunteers are navigating what your trainings can offer, if they are trying to complete a certain sequence of training so that they can get into a volunteer role that they really want. If they have questions, it is so helpful if you just simply put your photo and your contact information in as many places as is practical. And for that matter, on your website as well. So getting your name, face, contact information, and at the bottoms of your newsletters and your communications, it can be so helpful for your volunteers who don't get to actually sit down and talk to you or see you in person to feel a little bit more connected to you. It is super helpful. Okay, tools and resources. So these are mostly free, and you guys are getting a copy of the slides. I will say that they're, whether they're free or not is changing constantly. But to start with, video and screen recording, your phone, if you have a smartphone, you probably have a decent camera on it. You can get an external microphone that you can just plug into the charger port of your phone. There's a bunch of different kinds that you can get if you want really clear and crisp sound, or if you have just a quiet spot in your facility, you can capture video. It's better and better all the time as technology marches forward. There are apps, both desktop and mobile apps that you can use to edit videos. You can add on, your text, your graphics. You can sort clips of video and create videos. Again, I want to caution you, if you are offering these online, like on your website or on YouTube, keep them really, or on social media, keep them really short. We used to think a 3 to 5 minute video was very short, but how many of you guys have been scrolling through Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and videos start automatically playing, and if it doesn't hook you in like 2 seconds, you're not going to watch the rest? Or if you look at it and you're like, oh, this is 45 seconds long, you know, that's already a long video to us. So depending on your usage, if you are using these videos on social media, keep them under a minute, I would say. If you're using them on internal trainings or trainings that you kind of already have their attention captured, you can go longer. And if you're creating videos to sort of integrate into, like, say your volunteers, say it's a volunteer committee, and you want to provide kind of some background and some training on some pretty standard stuff, and you know, motivate them, and you have created a video. If they're already in a committee meeting that's a 90-minute meeting, I feel like as long as every minute is super awesome, you can have a 10-minute video, and that works great. Also, you can use PowerPoint to create videos. If you guys are not familiar, so one of my favorite ways to figure out how to do stuff online is to just Google something and then go through the YouTube how-to videos. But if you're not familiar, when you create a PowerPoint slideshow, you can time the slides, create a video file of the slides going through at the time that you program. And then you can use a free audio recording program called Audacity to record your voiceover or music or whatever it is. And then you can lay that audio on top of your PowerPoint. And as long as you're not using the ugly PowerPoint templates, no one will ever be able to tell that you used PowerPoint to create a video. Another cool one is Cloud App. This is what I was saying. You can create a GIF of, say, your screen, trying to show about, like, if you're showing them how to sign in online and log their hours, that you can create a GIF of the mouse clicking on this, it going to the next page, and then the next page. And then because it's a GIF, it'll just repeat. So you can embed that into a how-to document or a how-to web page. Webinars, there are so many webinar platforms, and there are more being birthed every day, it seems like. Zoom is what we're on right now. It has a free model. It also has paid professional, different price tiers. GoToWebinar is an old standard. Crowdcast is one that we use here at Nonprofit Connect for those more interactive webinars where we want people to be able to chat with one another, as well as comment on one another's questions and keep those comments kind of nested, like discussion forum style. Google Hangouts, it was rumored that this free web conferencing offering from Google was going to be discontinued. It seems to still be going. So I'm still using it. Creating graphics, there are tons of resources for creating graphics, but some really quick and free ones are Canva. Google Slides and Google Docs have templates that you can kind of tweak to make more consistent with your brand. Pablo by Buffer. Pablo itself is free. Meme Generator, more and more, we are seeing more trainings getting effective information across very quickly if you can distill it into a meme. So it's not just for silly social media stuff. You can use it in your trainings. If you're surveying your audience, there are free form makers, quiz makers, test makers, survey makers. And a lot of these are free or freemium. So there's a free version and then there's a paid version that has more features. What else? What are you guys using when you are doing stuff online with your volunteers? Are you guys using online surveys? Are you using video? Are you doing webinars? Are you creating graphics and handouts and infographics and things like that? Just type it in the chat and let me know what you guys are using. We can actually, if Gretchen doesn't mind, I believe that she will be able to pull from the chat anything that you guys contribute that you're using, any kind of tools, and then we can include that in the email to go out. So appreciate your contributions. And then real quickly, because Nonprofit Connect offers so much for leaders of volunteers, I just want to let you know, I shouldn't say most of you, that was presumptuous. But I know a lot of you guys are members of Nonprofit Connect, and you're the folks that we get together with as often as possible. But if anyone is not currently a member of Nonprofit Connect and you are looking for resources for volunteer engagement, you can find and post volunteer opportunities. One area for this that I really like, and it's kind of like Volunteer Match or something like that, where you put in your posting and then people contact you directly. We really like when folks post not only those specific volunteer roles, like we need someone to answer the phones from 2 to 4 on Wednesday, that type of thing, but what kind of volunteer groups can you take? Because a lot of times the businesses and the corporations and the foundations will look through Volunteer Link or Volunteer Match or any of those websites for organizations that specifically say, yes, we take corporate groups of 20 to 50 people. So I highly recommend that you use the internet to advertise your positions in attractive ways and creative ways. And that includes boards, committees, and then also jobs. If you are expanding your volunteer department, kudos, congratulations. If you're able to hire more staff to do this awesome work of engaging volunteers, our job post or our job board is where most of us in our membership have found our jobs. Same thing with interns. And then Resource Link, this is a members only, there's a page on a website that has really good resources, but actually diving into templates and samples and things like that, that is a members only feature for Nonprofit Connect. And then specific professional development, we have guidebooks online, we have institutes in person here in Kansas City, we bring in national speakers, we also have a robust, I can't even list of the programs that we do for boards, but remember your boards are volunteers, and depending on the size and scope of your organization, your organization may be all volunteers, right? It may be your board, your advisory board, your staff might be all volunteers, and then your program or event volunteers. So volunteer engagement really runs through the entire fabric of your organization. So when you're providing trainings for your volunteers, you may pilot it with a specific group, but you can use these tools throughout your organization. Okay, I wanted to save plenty of time for questions. I apologize for speaking quickly, but I know from what you guys said in the chat that we are, for the most part, familiar with dipping our toes into moving our training online. So I know that Gretchen has been monitoring the chat. Gretchen, do you have any comments that you wanted to pull out or questions that you wanted to pull out?
Yes, the first one is, how do you know that they have done it?
I'm sorry?
How do you know that someone has completed the online training?
Oh, yeah, that's an excellent question. So you can set it up a variety of ways. It kind of depends on your just your technology setup. But one way I've done it is that we create a quiz at the end. And it's not like a super difficult, you have to have gleaned all this knowledge from the training, but it's basically, it proves to me that you watched the entire video or that you reviewed the required documents. And then the quiz outcome, depending on what platform you use, but the completion page you can edit. At the completion page, that's where you give them the link to access the next step. So they can't get to the next step unless they complete what you have decided they have to complete before they move on. If you're using some of the video hosting software, you can actually require a minimum. So if it's a 3-minute video, you can require the minimum they have to watch 2.5 minutes or something like that. So there are little tools and tips and tricks. If you're using an actual learning management system, those are very common and easy to find. If you're using something specific, whoever asked that question, you can just email me if that did not help you, and I can see if I can dig into it a little bit further.
All right, the next question is talking about, let's see, I've got 4 or 5 of them here. The question is, how do you suggest transitioning and how to go into live training into that recorded? I think you've talked about it a little bit more, but maybe if there's an example you could share.
Moving into online training live and recorded?
Moving from live in person to recorded training.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, one great thing about moving from an in-person training to online is that probably you have taught this so many times that you know the material very intimately. You are in a good position to be able to organize it by concept, so that your online training, rather than being a whole long video or a whole long handbook, because you've been teaching this so much, you know this concept, simple, this next concept, need to know. So if you've been teaching it, breaking it down to be digestible online is much easier. As far as the user experience, I think that, again, going in baby steps really helps. Checking in often. If you can, there are ways to automate this, but you can also do it manually. Once they complete one small piece, that they get an email from you that says, hey, thanks for doing this piece. Do you have any questions at this point? Do you know what your next step is? Or, go ahead and give them the next step. Giving them a lot of touch points, making it so that they know they have an option to contact you, but they are not required to, because you also don't want to end up being that person that no one opens your emails because you just emailed 15 times a day. But yeah, knowing what are the small concepts within that training that need to be broken down, knowing what needs to be hands-on or in person, and what can be moved online to be more efficient and get the same or better outcomes. And then building in a lot of touch points for feedback, and for guidance.
Okay, the next question is, can you recommend a good ratio of online training and this compares to in-person training? So, for example, you may want to do a lot in-person training of 10 people. Do you recommend staying with that same ratio for online?
Oh, okay. So like how many attendees or how many participants?
Yes.
I mean, it's really going to depend on your organization and your structure and your culture. But I think that if you're doing something live, like a webinar like this, you can open it up to a very large number without losing quality or interaction. With that, just be realistic about what do you want the outcome to be. So if you want 100% participation, you're going to have to build in some incentives. Maybe, again, make sure that you have something in there that'll tell you if someone completed it, or if you're using a webinar system, it'll tell you they were logged on for this, at this time, they logged off at that time. Or just know that you can have 100 people on your webinar or registered for your webinar, probably half of them, if it's free and at a not lower level, I shouldn't say that, but like a more beginner level, maybe half of them will show up live. Maybe a handful will watch the recording. Of the ones who showed up live, without you checking in, a small number will actually follow up with the next step. So just know what do you want your outcome to be? If you want it to be, we want 100% completion, then yeah, I would probably stick with a smaller number of people, at least to start. If 10 people in a training is your comfort zone, I would start with that. If the reason you're going online is to get more people, then you want to immediately be looking at how you can grow that. If the reason you want to move online is because of trainer availability or geography, maybe changing that number is not that important. It's just getting the information to the right people at the right time.
So the next question has to do with older volunteers, and certainly near and dear to my heart. One agency I worked at, it was exactly as you described, that the volunteers were very tech savvy. And unfortunately, at my organization, the staff was not. So it was hard to get people to, the staff to, get buy-in for the value and, the time it takes to invest in that. So some talking points for the tech phobic, either on the volunteer or the staff side.
Well, I mean, the first thing is to know, what do they want? And how is this going to get them what they want? So if we go into this saying, I want to move this training online because I want more volunteers in here and I don't want to teach all the classes myself, then it doesn't create buy-in. So whatever the population is, or the group of people who you are trying to get them to buy in, just keep at the top of your mind all the time, what is it that they want out of this? If they don't want online training, and the reason for that is that they don't want to be part of a learning curve, to make someone learn a new system, to get engaged, then keep that at the forefront. So address their fear, quickly show them how this will work for them. Ask for their input. Depending on how much resistance they're showing you, they might just say, I actually have a lot of really great ideas for how this could work, but I can't do this by myself. And then you can partner with them. And I'm sorry, does that answer the question? Because you also mentioned the generational piece.
Well, we'll see what comes back in the chat. But I've got to follow up to the question about the ratio of online versus in-person.
Oh, yeah.
And this person says, for clarification, all of the volunteers need to go through the same training. How much required training should be online and how much should be in person?
I think that, so what I have found successful was doing the basic orientation, the big umbrella of, here's our mission and vision, here are our opportunities, here are some very basic expectations, that was available online to anyone who was interested. At the point that we wanted to ask for a little bit more commitment, we would have them come in person and either interview or get a tour or have a conversation. And then for their first level of actual training within a role, we did that fully online. And then at the end of their online training, they got access to schedule their first shift with a mentor or a buddy. And that mentor or buddy would then do 3 sessions with them before they were on their own. I think that if you can build in some good human interaction where people feel supported and they feel like someone brought them into the organization without them having to, sink or swim or figure it out all for themselves, you can have those first steps be online. And then what you're asking of your volunteers or your staff to then train in person it's going to be those who have already shown a level of commitment by completing whatever your online steps are. I found that worked for my organization pretty well. I think that if your organization has a little bit of a different structure, it might make sense to do those info sessions in person and have those face-to-face conversations to feel out. Can we be a good matchmaker between you and our organization? And then invite those from the info session who really make a connection with the organization to then do something a little bit more rigorous, either in person or online. So again, I know it sounds like kind of a cop-out answer, but it really depends on your organization's structure, your organization's volume of volunteers, the level of required training, the culture and expectations. So one cool thing about online training is that while there is opportunity to archive things and do it once and use it over and over again, there's also a great opportunity for agility. So you can test something. If it doesn't work, it's very easy to change course. So I think starting out with a lower ratio would always be my advice, just because you don't want to bring on a huge change all at once. It also gives you more agility because you haven't invested all this time and all these resources into creating a big long training, that you're doing it piece by piece, that you're sprinkling it maybe all around, that you are collecting questions or applications ahead of time, and you are using a couple of video clips in your in-person training, or you're using a survey tool where people can text to the number and it creates like the results in real time, that you can sprinkle in these uses of technology, especially for feedback throughout, before the training, during the training, after the training. But what, the bulk, the meat and potatoes of what you're doing is what your volunteers have already come to expect. The online stuff is a bonus. It's an asset. It's helped smooth something out that was a bit of a hiccup or a barrier before. So yeah, I would start slow, dream big, involve your volunteers, involve your team, and don't be afraid to try something. It doesn't have to be perfect. And don't feel like, I have to build this huge thing so that the volunteers will have a beautiful online experience. Yeah, you want them to have a good experience, but ultimately you want them to be engaged in your mission and in the work it takes to get that done. Does that help?
I'm getting some feedback that it does. I've got some more great questions. So to go back to a little bit, the other one was how to create a community and keep volunteers engaged.
Mm-hmm. Do we know what kind of organization we're talking about? So I can definitely speak to the community. Actually, a lot of you guys who are on this call, we have at Nonprofit Connect, our Volunteer Managers Institute is a 2 to 3 day intensive with speakers speaking on different topics. The speakers are volunteers. They're leaders of volunteers in the field, but they're volunteering their time to speak at the Institute. The participants then, after the Institute is over, a lot of our participants will then volunteer to host a lunch and learn, something like that. And over the years, we've created a community of leaders, of volunteers. And we keep that up through doing lunch and learns, doing professional development, bringing in national speakers, doing webinars, continuing to provide resources, but also continuing to provide opportunities for folks to take on a leadership role. I know one thing that Susan Ellis mentioned was that when you're with other leaders of volunteers, invite each other to speak at each other's organizations. It lends instant credibility. I think sometimes it can be a helpful tool for moving forward with something that you didn't feel like there was organizational support for. But yeah, so at Nonprofit Connect, I feel like we have created this sort of community that's a blend of in-person and online. At the animal shelter where I worked, the Facebook groups were huge. And for better and for worse, honestly, because we had a large group of very passionate volunteers. And we had different groups, like, we would have outcomes from the Facebook groups that were part of our mission. We might have a volunteer post in the Facebook group, hey, I was at the shelter, I saw this animal who looked really stressed out. Can someone who's really experienced with shy and timid dogs take a look at this dog? And then someone else in the Facebook group sees it. They do that. They post updates. Someone else, takes photos. They post that. So the Facebook groups themselves were a place for volunteers to accomplish more in their role than they otherwise could have, because they could connect with one another. So I think if you're building in ways for volunteers, one, not just to connect with one another and chat, but also to help them level up in whatever they want to get out of volunteering, whether that is they want to build their skills that's relevant to a potential career. I had a lot of volunteers who really, they came because they cared about animals, but they stayed because they made friends at the shelter. So they were really socially motivated. They weren't quite as achievement motivated. So in that community, in that online community, building in ways for volunteers to connect, for volunteers to get more out of volunteering that makes their clocks tick. And then if there's any way to actually use those communities to help them do their volunteer job better, it makes them more invested in their actual volunteer role. It helps open up possibilities to them. If they may have come to your organization for a specific volunteer opportunity, or maybe just a single day of service. And if they join in your community, they see, you know what, you guys are doing a donation drive. I'm going to take, you know, a wish list to work and collect donations for you. I think if your communities can, I mean, ideally they're like self-propelling, but it's going to take some handwork on your part at first to make sure that they, you know, you're not inviting people to an empty room, that you're inviting people to be part of something that's going to make volunteering a better experience for them. And it's really easy to do if your volunteers are socially motivated, because automatically that's like on their list of things that makes them love volunteering. Those online communities, you can also build in a file repository of helpful, I don't know, shareable graphics for social media, or you know, your marketing one pager, or just things to help your volunteers move your organization's mission forward, raise awareness for your organization, raise money, raise donations, that kind of thing. It's, again, it can be a labor of love, because you're going to love that your volunteers are so into it. You're also going to probably need help managing it once your community gets to the point where it is self-propelling, because you want to keep it a really positive, smoothly running space online, which, I mean, every online group has at least one moderator who has to go in there and respond to everybody, or you know, address questions or concerns. So yeah, building community online, I think the more we use social media in our everyday lives, the more that becomes second nature to a lot of our volunteers. But we're all still learning. We're all still learning how it works. And it's also always changing, just like the features of a Facebook group, and the algorithms that make people get notifications from your group. Those are always changing too. So again, you just have to be agile. You have to be nimble. You have to be flexible. But if you're finding that it is not working, or it's not creating a better experience for your volunteers, or it's not creating better outcomes for your organization, don't be afraid to dial it back or to put a pause on it.
Now, Timami, you've got one more question before we wrap up. I'll just read it. We are considering the creation of an online training for our new volunteer orientation. This is the first introduction to our organization after being an accepted, cleared volunteer. Any tips to making this less boring? It is just a PowerPoint training. Orientation is currently 1 hour long.
Okay. So jokes, memes, funny pictures are always welcome. I think that if you can make it less of an info style orientation and more of a like a welcome to our team, welcome to our culture. This is what we're about. This is what sets us apart from organizations that you may have volunteered with in the past. Show the personality, I guess the brand of your organization. If a tour of your facility is part of your in-person, I think that there are ways to visually do that in your slideshow, whether that's a video, whether that is, photos. So think about, I don't know if you guys remember, again, I'm in the animal welfare niche here, but if you guys remember that video that went viral, that was an animal shelter using, I think, a cell phone to create a video that was like, we have an adoption special for dogs and cats in the shelter. But they did it like a really low budget used car salesman video. And it went viral nationally, not because it was slick and perfect, but because it showed some personality and some heart and some creativity and some ingenuity. So I think if your in-person training gets people engaged, do more of what you do in person when you move it online. If that is telling stories and anecdotes and sharing a lot of mission moments, make sure that you don't lose that when you move it online. If that's actually getting to tour the facility and see behind the scenes and see what's going on, make sure that you emphasize that. The other thing is again, always make sure that once they complete that training, or even before or during, that they have an easy way to access someone to answer their questions. And again, jokes and memes, and baby animals and jokes.
Well, wonderful. That looks like your wrap-up slide. So I would like to just say thank you so much to Tomomi, and including humor and a great meme at the end. I think that's awesome. Her contact information is there. So I just have just a few moments to wrap up. But again, I just want to say thank you so much for your talent and your expertise. It's most appreciated, and I learned a lot as well. So just a couple of quick items here before we go. First of all, thank you to Verified Volunteers for their sponsorship to Alive to help expand our online webinars for you, for members and our colleagues. And I would also, oops, not on the right screen. There we go. And we've gone through the questions, but just a couple of quick announcements. You'll get a follow-up email tomorrow with quick survey questions. We really appreciate your feedback, as well as the link to the recording and how to get the slide deck. If you're coming to the Points of Light conference next week in St. Paul, you're welcome to attend our happy hour. You can sign up from the Alive calendar. And next month's Alive Academy, July 10th, is going to be a recap of the conference. Also, what's happening with the Alliance for National Engagement. August 13th is about busting myths and believing benefits, strategies to help staff want to work with volunteers. And we've just listed September as well, which didn't make it on this slide. And it's all going to be about certification, certificates, and credentials, and what that's all about. And this year's Volunteer Management Hybrid Conference, which I know Tomomi and the good folks at Nonprofit Connect have participated in before, is going to cover some of this information that Tomomi's talked about today in terms of tech trends for 2020 and beyond, and how technology is going to influence how volunteers volunteer and how we manage them as well. And you can check our homepage and calendar for more info. And that is our slide as well, to thank all of you for attending. Hopefully we'll see you at next month's webinar. You can find out more information on the calendar. And again, Tomomi, thank you so much. Donna, thank you for being here today. And with that, we will say goodbye and wish everyone a good rest of the week. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.